Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second Lilia and Lou podcast. And I'm Lilia, and Lou is with me.
Hello, everyone. Hello.
We will bring you the latest news from the King world.
We have a special guest, Bev Vincent. We'll review Ghost Brothers of Darkland County.
And we have an interview with Richard Matheson, who's written the script for Battleground. And for those of you who listen to this podcast through iTunes, if you head over to my site at liliaslibrary.com/podcast, you will find links and photos of the stuff we talk about in this podcast.
And now, join us in the death room for the latest Stephen King news.
And for the news this time, the biggest thing that's happened since last time is that TV station Sci-Fi is going to make probably a miniseries based on Eyes of the Dragon. As far as we know, it hasn't been decided if it's going to be a TV movie, or a miniseries. It sounds like a miniseries, but nothing has been confirmed as of yet. And personally, I am a bit skeptic about it. I don't think they might be able to pull it off. What do you think?
It's hard to say at this point. Sci-Fi has done some original programming over the years, and being in Canada, I don't get their station here, but this sounds like a whole new initiative for them. It's not just Stephen King. They're taking on some other projects as well. So we'll have to see how it plays out. But yeah, at this stage of the game, you have to take these kind of announcements with a grain of salt, because things could change very quickly. So we'll keep our fingers crossed, hope for the best, but expect the worst.
Yeah, I'm a bit disappointed that the animated version isn't being done, but I guess that's the case.
Yeah, well,
sometime.
These things have a tendency to feed from other things, and I think with the dragon aspect of this story is probably because of how well received Game of Thrones has been on HBO.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So then our next item is we reported earlier in our previous podcast that the Carrie is getting a remake, and there's been additional casting news since then. And Julianne Moore, whom you should all know from quite an extensive background of movies, has officially been confirmed as being offered the role of Carrie's mother. Now, we don't know at this point whether she's accepted or not, but I know, Hans, you had some reservations about them remaking this project, but I'm wondering how you're feeling now, because the talent list that's being attached to this project is getting more and more impressive with each announcement.
I agree, definitely. I'm more interested in it now than I was last time we talked about it. And I really hope she accepts the role. It would definitely be something good for this remake. I'm still a bit skeptic, but I'm more positive now than I was before.
I definitely am too. I think the hardest nut to crack is going to be transitioning the story from the time period when it originally took place in the 70s to today's age, and still make it relevant without making it seem kind of clunky. That's probably the biggest challenge that they're going to have.
Yeah, I agree. It won't feel right if we suddenly see Carrie twittering.
Yeah. Or somebody's going to be taking YouTube videos of her and putting them up right away, right? That would be interesting.
Yeah, I agree.
But I mean, it's been done. Like if the recent Sherlock Holmes movie series with Benedict Cumberbatch, they've done a fantastic job of transferring Sherlock Holmes from the 1800s to the 21st century. I just love what they've done with that series. So it is possible. I hope they will be able to crack that nut for this project.
Next thing we have is the fact that King will be doing a cameo in a movie called Writers. This one came from just popped up a photo on Twitter, actually, on King doing the audio parts. And I contacted the director of the movie, and apparently the movie is about a family of writers, where one of the kids is a big King fan. And I really don't know much more about King's part in the movie, and the movie itself has just wrapped and will premiere later this year, so I guess we just have to wait to see what he will do with it. But it's interesting to see that he's engaged himself in this.
Yeah.
I know he doesn't do it often, so it must be something special with this one.
Yeah, he must have some connections with somebody, either the production crew associated with the film or maybe one of the actors, I don't know, but it looks very interesting. The producer of this film produced Crazy Heart, which was a Jeff Bridges project last year, for which he won an Academy Award, it was like almost an indie film, but it was a pretty great film. So if she's attached with this project, maybe that was the thing that attracted Stephen King to this project. I'm just speculating. I really don't know what reason he decided to do it.
Yeah.
That might be why he...
And I think he plays himself,
Yeah.
so...
Which is...
Yeah.
Which he should be used to, since he wrote about himself in The Dark Tower, so...
Yeah.
This should be a piece of cake.
Yeah. Okay. Last piece of news is something personal to me. Those of you who follow my site knows that I have a mascot called Marv, the library policeman. Who's actually a really cool dude, if you ask me.
Yep.
And as of now, you can actually buy him as a keychain or a necklace if you want. A
keychain, maybe a necklace? I don't know.
Yeah, you might want something scary around your neck.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's about 2 inches long and done by a company called Big Blue Box Production. And I'll have a link and photo on my site so you can see where you can order it if you're interested. If you live in the US, it will cost you $25 including shipping. So if you need some new jewelry, you can always check that out.
I have to say, looking at the picture, it's a very detailed figure for that size, so it's quite impressive.
Yeah, it is. You can't really tell he's that small on the picture. So I haven't seen it in real life yet, so I'm waiting for my versions to arrive. So it will be interesting.
Cool.
Yeah, and that wraps up the news for this time. Today we have a special guest with us, Bev Vincent. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hi.
Thanks for bearing with me, Bev. This is only the second podcast I'm doing.
No problem at all.
Okay. So, Bev, nice to finally talk to you live. We have been emailing each other for years.
Yes, that's true. I think the only other time that I've heard your voice was when we were together on a conference call for Bag of Bones with Annabeth Gish.
Yeah. So this is a rare opportunity. It's nice talking to you.
Good talking to you, too. We've exchanged many, many emails over the years.
Yeah, I don't even dare to guess how many. So, you attended the premiere of Ghost Brothers of Darkland County.
Yes, that was quite an experience. The first time I've ever been to a red carpet event.
Was this the premiere open to the public?
Yeah, it had already been running for a week in what they call previews. So up to that point, nobody is allowed to review it because they are still sort of shaking out any problems and issues that they have. And then from the premiere night on, they're considered public performances that are eligible for reviews. There were a lot of reviewers in the audience that night, as well as a lot of special guests of the cast and crew.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit about what special guests attended?
Well, the obvious ones who were there were Stephen King, John Mellencamp, the two of them were the authors of the play, and T-Bone Burnett, who was director of the musical part of the program. So those were the three who were guests, along with their respective guests. I know that Meg Ryan, the actress, who's John Mellencamp's girlfriend, she was there. They actually met when she was part of the recording process for the CD version of Ghost Brothers that they put together a couple of years ago, which has not yet been released. But other people that we saw in the audience, one person I recognized was Charles Barkley, the basketball player. Maybe lives in Atlanta. I'm not sure why he was there, but we saw him a few times during the evening.
Was it a party around the premiere, or was it just a little mingle before and after?
Beforehand, a lot of people sort of hung around out in the lobby, and that's where the red carpet was. They had the Ghost Brothers backdrop, and King and Mellon and various other people stood there, fielded some questions from reporters, had their pictures taken. The people who were in attendance mostly were just mingling, talking. We were quite a large group. We had been invited by the moderator of Stephen King's message board, so there was probably about 20 of us, including Marcia, Stephen King's administrative assistant, Russ Dorr, whose name you might recognize. He's done the research for a number of King's books, as far back as The Stand, but recently Under the Dome and 11/22/63. Dave Hinchberger was there, my buddy from the Overlook Connection bookstore, who lives just outside of Atlanta. He was there with his family and some friends. So yeah, there was quite a large group of us. We just sort of hung around together. We didn't really see too much of what was going on the red carpet part of things. And then afterwards, we were invited to the cast parties held in a nearby hotel. So a lot of the members of the cast were there with their family and friends, as well as King and Mellencamp and T-Bone Burnett and people like that.
So were you there only as a guest, or did you work writing reviews of it?
You know, anytime I do something like this, I go primarily as a guest, but I try to get some mileage out of it too. So I wrote up 2 articles for FearNet, which has a partnership with Cemetery Dance. The first one I wrote was a history of the long road of this musical from the time that they first conceived of it back in about 2000 until it finally made it to the stage in Atlanta. And then the second part of what I did for FearNet was a review of the performance.
Yeah, it's been a long ride for it to finally premiere. Why do you think it's been so long?
One of the primary reasons is that you've got 2 people who are very busy doing all sorts of things. You know, King always has books coming out, Mellencamp is touring and recording, and so to get the 2 of them together at the same place at the same time to work on something, I think in the early part of the development that was probably the big issue. And then their concept of how it was going to be presented, I think, changed. One of their original plans, and they actually workshopped it in New York, was to have it premiere either off-Broadway or on Broadway. And what they discovered when they started working with the people involved with Broadway, and some of the people who were producers of Spamalot were involved, was that they wanted to turn it into something more grandiose than what King and Mellencamp were comfortable with. They wanted huge orchestras and big show tunes, and at some point they decided that wasn't what they wanted, so they stepped back from it a bit and decided to workshop it in a more regional theater, maybe even in like a very small setting. The idea being if they could minimize the stage and the production around it, then there was a better chance that they could move it to repertory theaters across the country. Whereas if it was a huge, big production with, you know, a 60-piece orchestra or something like that, that would limit their options. So they settled in on Atlanta, which has quite a reputable and growing theater. The Alliance Theater's gained quite a reputation over the last few years, and they focused on that. Plus they had some issues with the director. That they originally were going to have Liv Ullmann come over and direct it, but there were scheduling issues. She got involved in other projects, and that just really never came together. So I think finally in 2010 they picked Susan V. Booth, who is the with the Alliance Theater in Atlanta. And once that all came into place, I think from that forward things moved very quickly. But the show had been announced for, was it 2009? I think was the first time that there was a schedule for it, and then that got delayed. Finally, 2012, they announced the date, and it's probably got a week left in its run now for like a 4-week run in Atlanta.
Do you think it will continue to run in other places after that?
That's hard to say. I think probably they'll evaluate their month-long run to see what sort of issues they had. But I don't know, do they have to wait for an invitation to go somewhere? Do they go out and seek new venues for it? I'm not sure how that process works, so I think we'll just have to wait and see. The other thing we'll have to wait and see how it comes out is the CD recording. I know they had big plans for not a cast album, but a superstar album with people like, I can't even remember, Chris Christopherson and Sheryl Crow and Elvis Costello. And that was all recorded, and T-Bone Burnett, produced that album. But it was recorded so long ago that I think there have been significant changes to the music, to the lyrics, to the number of songs. Songs have been added and taken out. The lyrics have been changed. And even the night that we were there, the title of the last song, there was an insert. They had changed the title of the last song between the time the program was printed and the night of the premiere. So a lot of what was recorded 2 or 3 years ago would be completely different from what the actual play ended up being. So I'm not sure what their plans are for that.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see both versions, to see how it developed.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, to hear the music sung professionals, and they also recorded the entire dialogue section of it using people like Meg Ryan. That's how she came into it. The actors spoke the words, and then they had professional musicians singing the songs. So that would be interesting to hear as well.
Yeah. And maybe we get to read King's written story as well.
Absolutely. I don't know exactly what form the book, they call it, for a play takes, but I expect it would be something on the order of some of the screenplays that he's done. And unlike, most screenplays are very minimalist, King tends to write a lot around the dialogue with his descriptions and his comments and his thoughts, so it could be interesting to read that.
Yeah. So, could you give us a review of the show itself?
The whole production had a very, very professional look and feel to it. The stage was as professional as anything that you'd see on Broadway. It consisted primarily of this cabin, which is in Mississippi, a little town called Belle Reve, which is like beautiful dream. And so you see the inside of the cabin. There's the living area, and off to one side there's a little bedroom, which was one of the boys. It had bunk beds, so it was like a kid's room. And then the left-hand side of the stage was where they had exterior shots, some of the flashbacks. There was a lover's leap. Two of the actors actually jump quite a large distance. It must be like a 10 or 15 foot drop they go down, and they have to do that 3 or 4 times during the course of the play. So that was quite adventurous. Then there's sort of a raised set where there is a cafe, a roadside cafe bar, where a couple of the actors come every now and then. They meet up and they observe what's going on. And then the band, which is just 4 musicians, people who play routinely with Mellencamp, are up above that even further still in a screened-in area, so you can sort of see them, but they're playing live during the course of the play. The lighting effects are just amazing. Even before the play started, you could see figures walking across the stage, ghostly shapes that were projected. The lights were used to change the way the stage looked and felt. At one point it looked like the whole thing was on fire. Words and pictures are projected at different points during the play. And so just from a purely technical point of view, it was extremely well done. There were people who were lifted up through elevators in the floor, and the props and things like that came and went. It was all very smooth and slick. Quite a large cast. There's the present family. So basically you've got 2 brothers who are early 20s. Their parents, a girl who sort of used to be one of their brother's girlfriend and is now with the other one. So that's the sort of the contemporary cast. And then there is the backstory, which is set about 40 years earlier, and there are 2 more brothers, and again another girl who came between them. And then there are a lot of bit players that circle around them. And then in the middle of all this is this character called The Shape, who's a little bit like a Randall Flagg character. He takes credit for everything bad that's ever happened. He's sort of like the bad demon that sits on your shoulder. If there's an angel whispering in your ear with good thoughts, he's whispering with bad thoughts, and usually it's his that get through. And he's jaunty and saucy, and he struts around and he interacts with the characters, even though they aren't aware of his presence. And he really sets the tone for the piece, because he's sinister and he's sly and he's funny. He's got tattoos. He looks a little bit like a punk rocker, or sometimes he has a guitar that he strums. He really sort of sets the stage, because he's the first voice you hear, and he sets the attitude. Everybody in the cast sings at various points. There's a lot of dialogue, and then the songs sort of stop the forward motion of the story, while either a single person or a group of people sing something which expands on the current plot. There are some plays where the whole story is told through song, and this isn't that sort of a play. The songs here are just meant to be reflective thoughts, sometimes dialogue between characters. But everybody from the ghosts to the current family, to even a 10-year-old boy who is the younger version of the father in the contemporary story, they all have their little songs. I think there's something on the order of 16 or 17 songs over the course of the 2 hours. It's divided into 2 acts. The first act is mostly the father bringing his family together because he has a story he wants to tell them. He knows when he tells them the story that it's going to change the way they think about the family, because there is a legend around the way his brothers died back in 1970s, I think it was, and that legend isn't true, and he's the only one who knows the true story. He was 10 at the time, he saw what happened, but he allowed this sort of legend It's a little bit like a Romeo and Juliet type of legend to be built up, a romantic legend. But he sees his sons going down the same fatal pathway that his brothers did. His brothers were both killed in that one evening. And they feuded all the time, and they feuded over a girl. And his sons are the same way. They're always fighting. And it's not just yelling. They actually get into physical altercations. At the time of the play, one of the brothers has his arm in a cast because the other one in a fight broke his arm. And so he sees the past repeating itself, but his sons don't know the past, so they can't learn from it. So he's brought them together to the cabin so he can tell them the truth and hopefully affect the way that their lives continue on. One brother is successful, one brother's not successful. The successful brother has just sold a book for $500,000. The other brother wants to be a musician, but he blew his big chance when there was a talent agent in the audience at one of his shows, and whether it was his nerves or whether the shape came in and messed things up, that's left open to interpretation. So there's constant friction between them, and then there's this girl who used to be the musician's girlfriend and is now with the writer who's on his way to New York and will possibly take her with him, although she, as the play goes on, she tends to doubt that he'll actually take her along. And she maybe is there just to stir up trouble. And so that's sort of, in a nutshell, what the story is. It's the father trying to gather the courage to tell this story and then to hopefully change the outcome for his sons.
It sounds like a lot of story.
Yeah, it's complicated. It's a complicated story, and a lot of the first act is, well, you might almost call it dithering. The father is sort of, I brought you here to tell you the story. Oh, I can't tell you right now. And there's, sort of a lot of angst and build up. And then there's a really powerful song at the end of the first act, which brings the whole cast together, and it's called "Burn This Cabin Down." And essentially, it's a burn down the past and build something new out of the ashes. Things pick up pace quite a bit in the second act when we get more into the real details of what happens between the brothers in the past and between the current brothers. The first act, I would say, is a little bit slow at times because nothing really happens. It's just a lot of
setup.
Yeah, a lot of setup, a lot of reflection. A little bit of the history of the past as people believe it to have happened. But I think if there were going to be some tightening done, that would be the part where you might look at. And then the fact that there's such a large cast, some of the characters don't get a lot to do. The mother is one in particular. She's there sort of as moral support for her husband. She doesn't know what the truth of the story is. She can't help with that. All she can be is support. But she has her own songs, and I guess, you have to give these actors something to do, and she's, one of the stars. She's a Tony Award-winning actress, but it really didn't contribute much. I would say probably the best performances, from my perspective, were the character of Jenna, who was the girlfriend of the uncles, the brothers from the past, and she was a good character. I mean, she got between the two boys, but I think she cared for them both, unlike the young woman in the contemporary story, who I'm not sure she cares for anybody but herself, and she's sort of slumps around and sulks and pouts and basically a spoiled brat. But the songs from the younger woman Jenna from the past, she's got a great voice, and you can hear her. It's like a contralto. I really enjoyed her performances. When everybody sings together, it's just magical. The harmonies and the way their voices work together, it's as good as anything I've ever seen. And then some of the solo pieces are exceptional as well. And then there's other ones which are just sort of, they're songs to do. They serve a purpose, but they really don't stand out.
Would you say the story is typical Stephen King story, or if you didn't know it was based on a story by King, would you know it?
There's something that happens towards the end, which anybody who's read any amount of King, it would be a dead giveaway. I don't want to say too much about it, but it's a theme that comes up time and time again. It's a theme that's in the Dark Tower series. He visited it a little bit in Kingdom Hospital, and I don't want to ruin too much for anybody who might get the chance to see it, but when that comes on, you say, yeah, this is definitely Stephen King tackling this sort of plot issue or philosophy from a different direction.
So overall, how well did you, you're saying the songs kind of either expanded on points of it, but did you find the play as a whole with the two pieces together an emotional experience? Like, were you engaged emotionally?
Absolutely. The story of the uncles, the young brothers, is really quite interesting. You get to see, there's one brother who's, he's the A student, There's a line there that they said even the family dog likes him better. He always shines.
Right.
But the other brother has an unexpected victory, which really is what sets everything in motion. He wins a shooting contest when everybody expected the other brother to win, and that's sort of the beginning of the day that ends in the tragedy. And yeah, I mean, there's Stephen King level characterization here, which is, you know, the thing that's always attracted me to King's work is, I mean, these are real people, and you understand what's going on. They're not just mouthing words or singing songs. You understand the conflict, and you see it then getting played out again by another generation with their own struggles and issues, but it's almost like the past is haunting the present, literally and figuratively, because the ghosts are mingling on the stage with the contemporary actors, which is an interesting concept. You know, they're draped and they walk around, and sometimes it's almost like they're singing to each other, although the living people are not aware of the ghosts, really.
Right. Cool.
So it's, yeah, I mean, it's definitely engaging, and the way it ended, definitely, it's just like, oh wow, there's a real sort of punch to the big reveal at the end. And yeah, I mean, definitely, I mean, everybody that I was with was just sort of, you sit there in dumb silence for a little bit when everything comes together at the end.
Is it kind of like a Cain and Abel story, or?
Definitely, there's definitely Cain and Abel reference. I mean, the struggle between the two brothers. Although it goes one step further in the past story, in that, you know, both Cain and Abel end up dead. It's not just one killing the other, but the mystery of the past hinges on how the second brother dies, and how, you know, there's a mythology, a romantic myth about how that happens, and the truth of it is really ugly. And that's the story that Joe McCandless has to tell to his own sons.
I'd love to see it. Jeez.
There is some gunplay that goes on. The first time the guns come out is during the shooting contest. And so it's like a rifle competition. And you've got, you know, 4 guys competing against each other, and then the best of those, and it gets down to the 2 brothers. But the intriguing thing about it is that they actually point the rifles at the audience. So you're sitting there, there's like 6 or 8 guys with rifles pointed right at you, and they pull the triggers, and there's the big bangs. And that's a little bit, you know, it takes you back a bit. But then another character gets shot later on, and the special effects around that are really quite impressive. I mean, his head explodes and there's blood everywhere. This isn't a play to take your kids to necessarily.
Right. Hence the warning.
It's got King levels of violence. You know, there's even a warning outside. You know, the way they do movie ratings, you know, rated M or rated PG-13. Well, this is rated SK, for SK levels of violence and sensuality and language. And the language is as coarse as you'd find in his novels. There is, you know, there's no nudity, but there's sexuality and sexual dialogue, and there is a considerable amount of graphically depicted violence. Not just fighting, but there's blood and guts. Let's put it that way.
Right. Does this play remind you of any of Stephen King's other stories at all?
No, I don't think it does. You know, the story idea itself originated with Mellencamp. Mellencamp was looking for a cabin in Indiana, a lakeside cabin, and I think he actually purchased it, found out the story about these people who had died in it. It was murder. It was a pretty terrible story. And I think buyer's remorse then, I'm not sure that he kept that, but that seed of the idea then he built into this idea of, you know, 2 brothers who were having a sibling rivalry, and that's what he brought to King, and then King sort of took that germ of an idea and built a larger story around it. But I wouldn't say that there's anything that you can put your finger on and say, you know, this reminds me an awful lot of something else. It's very much its own story.
Okay.
Although when the end comes, you start thinking, oh yes, Dark Tower, oh yes, this, oh yes, that. But that's more of the theme, I guess, than the story itself.
Right. And what about the songs? Like you said, there was one standout at the end of the first act. Was in general, because I am a big fan of John Cougar's music. So, like, does this music compare with, realizing it's a different entertainment form, but does it compare with his other material? Or
there's 1 or 2 songs that you could have said might have been on a John Mellencamp album.
Right.
But he really sort of branched out here. There's rockabilly, there's country and western, there's sort of like the ballads, the big show-stopping ballads that you might expect in a Broadway play. And you know, there's the fact that his band is playing. I mean, that's always there, so you can. But really, I mean, I think he's gone off and he's done bluegrass with this. He's all over the map and all sort of appropriate to whatever's going on at the time. So I think this was a chance for him to branch out. I think people who like Mellencamp's music in general will buy this stuff. Some of there's toe tapping songs, and there's songs that you can find yourself humming again a day or two later, and it's memorable stuff. It's not just stuff that they threw together. There are some really well designed and crafted and orchestrated songs here.
Cool. This is just something that I saw from pictures. T-Bone Burnett. He looks like a very imposing figure. In fact, I thought he kind of could play like a horror character himself. How did he strike you?
It's funny. We were out walking around in the afternoon so that we could figure out where we were going for the after party. And I was just walking down the sidewalk, and there goes T-Bone Burnett walking right by, in the middle of the streets in Atlanta. He's a tall guy. He's got the gray hair. He always wears sunglasses. He tends to wear dark clothing, but when I saw him in the afternoon, he was in sort of like a gray suit. I got the chance to talk to him a little bit after at the cast party afterward, and he's worked with everybody. He's been producing albums since the 1960s. He's worked with Dylan and Bruce Cockburn, just about anybody you'd care to name. And one of the most famous things he did was the music for "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?"
Oh, okay.
Which a lot of people would recognize. But if you look up his CV, you'll probably see all sorts of people whose work and even whose albums that you're familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
But he was just delightful to talk to. Not at all imposing or daunting. He was genuinely pleased to have people come up to him and talk to him about the play and the things that have been going on. He just seemed delighted by the way things had turned out. I might assume he's a baseball fan because he said, everybody brought their A game today. He said they weren't out there just hitting bunts or singles. They were getting doubles and triples and fence, and so there was lots of baseball analogies when he was talking about. But no, he was a great guy. I wish I'd had even more time to talk to him because he's got such a huge presence in the music field. Mm-hmm. He produced one of my favorite recent albums, which was the album that Elton John did with Leon Russell,
okay.
The Union. And Elton John is somebody who I've been listening to all my life, and to hear a producer like that come in and do something radically different with somebody whose music you're familiar with just sort of shows me the influence that a producer can have on a production, even by a big star like that. So he was great to talk to.
Cool.
I have to ask you, Bev, have you heard anything about this being released in some other ways, so we fans that don't live in the US will get the chance to see it? So we're talking about recording it, or?
There's been no word of that being done. I would love to hear a cast recording, apart from this superstar version that they did. I think that the cast is strong enough that they could do their own recording. And there's lots of precedent for doing things like that. Even the reboot of Carrie that they did recently that didn't last very long on Broadway, they're doing a cast recording of that. So I think it would be terrific if they could do that so that people could at least hear the music.
Mm-hmm.
One of the problems, I think, with just like an audio recording, at least, of the whole production is that there is such a large cast that it would be difficult, I think, to understand who was talking at any given point in time. The four young male actors, there's the two brothers from the past and the two from the present, sound enough alike that it could get very confusing, especially when the ghosts are talking around the living brothers. So I think if there were anything like that to be done, it might have to be like a live recording of the production. But the production's just about to end. I think it goes until the 13th, May 13th. So if they plan to do it, they'd have to do it pretty soon, because once it's done, then the actors go off to whatever they're doing next. That's always another issue. If they get invited to take this somewhere else, they would have to reassemble this group because they've got jobs and lives and things that they go off to in other directions. So,
it would be great if they recorded it and released it on DVD.
Yes, absolutely. If they do that, maybe there's some implications for possibilities of staging it elsewhere. So I don't know how that stuff all works.
Yeah.
Up next is Hans' interview with Richard Matheson. I apologize for the sound differences here. The volume levels are different here, so you might want to adjust your volumes and turn it up for this interview, and when the interview is done, turn your volume back down, as I could not make the sound any better without making it noisier. So please enjoy the interview and watch those volume levels.
So, Battleground. Tell me a little bit about how you came to do that.
Well, Barry Hoffman at Gauntlet Press has published a number of things that I was involved in, including my short story collection, Dystopia.
Yeah.
And so we formed over time an interest in discussing other potential projects, and we would periodically talk about what might be some interesting book projects. And by that point, Battleground had aired. It got great reviews. It had won 2 Emmys. And a lot of people were asking me about how it was made. People that I knew who were cinematographers, people I knew who were composers, people that were in special effects. There were actors. There was a great interest in exactly how it was done technically. And then other people who were not in the business, but who had seen it and had fallen in love with it, wanted to know more about it. So I said to Barry, why don't we think about doing a commemorative edition that would include interviews with all the different people that were involved, the key people. And he liked that idea very, very much. So then I began to talk to all the people involved and see if they would be available. They're all very busy.
Yeah.
So I had to sort of choreographing that became tricky. And over time, I was able to get interviews with everybody, or have interviews arranged, or have people write pieces. I mean, just as you see in the book.
Yeah.
And then getting in touch with Stephen King's lawyer, getting in touch with TNT. It was a long process. And then, of course, designing the cover and just everything. It was a long process.
Yeah. Were there ever any problems getting it done, or were everybody in favor of doing it?
Everybody was immediately wanted to do it. There was great enthusiasm. Everybody's very proud. I don't know if you've had a chance to read the individual pieces, but in every single interview, in every single piece that was written, people convey how proud they are.
Yeah.
Of being involved with the project. So everybody knew that it was very special, and everybody knew that it deserved to have a book that would commemorate that.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit about like the extra material on a DVD, where you can get deeper into how everything was done, and it's great to have that in book form, because it's a totally different experience than watching.
Well, I was involved with it from the beginning, obviously. Having done the screenplay, but then in working on the book and compiling it, talking to everybody and everything. And I would, along the way, I would look at different galley combinations. Before we went to the official galleys, I would look at all the pieces that were gathered together, and I would put them into kind of an unofficial galley. And every time I read it, going through for proof, to proofread it, I got hooked. Every single time.
Yeah.
I got hooked, and I knew, having read it so many times, but it's really quite fascinating.
Yeah. It's a quite different story, no dialogue in it. What was it that drew you to that story instead of any? I mean, King has done a lot of stories.
They came to me.
Okay.
TNT came to me. My agent called me and said, TNT would like you to do this adaptation. Are you available, and are you interested? And I said, yeah, sign me up now, before somebody else gets it.
Yeah.
And it came to me like that.
Yeah. Did you ever have any hesitation, because dialogue, but also the special effects must have been pretty big for being for something for TV?
Well, when I had no hesitation in that I was protected from where it was all going to end up as a sophisticated production, because I was just working on the script, as I was imagining it, which is, as you're working on a script, as you do adaptations of existing material, you can already see it in your mind because it already exists.
Yeah.
So I just really went through it. What Stephen had written was very clear and very strong, and it's a fantastic story.
Yeah.
And as I said in my piece in the book, the challenge that I had was to make it longer, because I thought the short story, if you had only done the short story, I think it probably would have been kind of. I think it would have exhausted itself a little too soon.
Yeah.
And that by adding something extra, it was able to kind of go to the next step. So the stakes were raised. And as I was working on it, I had finished the script, and I was reading through it, and I realized that the dialogue, such as it was, there really wasn't very much. That there were some clever ways to eliminate it completely.
Yeah.
I thought, what an interesting approach that would be. And I figured TNT would not be in favor of that, but they loved it. I mean, they had to decide within their own sort of approach to how they wanted the series. If one episode would be okay with no dialogue, and they decided it was going to work great.
Yeah, and it made that episode very special, I think.
I think so too. I
Yeah.
think so too. And well, the best movie this year was a silent movie, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It won the Oscar, so.
yeah. You were the first.
People get very swept up in it, and you have to have, I think, a kind of a simple story. If the story gets too complicated and requires information, I don't think you could do it, isn't it? But this is a very visceral, very kind of easy story to understand.
Yeah. Was it hard for William Hurt, who plays the lead, to? I guess he had to act against a lot of blue screens or green screens.
Yeah, I think it was really hard.
Yeah.
Really hard. I was in Melbourne watching them shoot it. I stayed in Melbourne about a week and a half, and I got to spend a good amount of time with him, and he was very, very, very challenged by not having any other actors really to work with him. He's got a couple of scenes, but there's no dialogue.
Yeah.
So he's got the scene with Bruce, and he's got the scene with Mia, and there was one scene that we shot and that I had in the script that actually got cut, which was him in a bathroom at the airport.
Yeah.
When he lands. Do you know about this?
No.
Oh, well, there was a scene that I'd written and that Brian filmed, and it was William in a bathroom at the airport, and this kind of tough punk comes in, and Hurt accidentally rubs against him, just as they're moving through the bathroom, and the punk challenges him with a look, and Hurt basically just takes him down.
Yeah.
He pulls the rings off of his nose, and he stuffs a balled up piece of paper in this punk's mouth, and you see how, and he's completely cold and removed as he's doing, and so you see exactly what he is. But what we realized was you didn't really need it, because you'd seen him kill Hans Morris, the toy manufacturer.
Yeah.
And you knew what was going to be coming in some sense, and that you already knew that he was an icy, deadly man. So it seemed like we were adding something that didn't need to be in there.
Yeah.
So we all decided we should take it out.
Yeah.
But Hurt, I think, had to find within himself a way to fulfill the whole character of John Renshaw. And I mean, you can imagine, to act. You're right. I mean, with blue screen, or he was just all by himself.
Yeah.
And it was. I mean, he's so. There is such nuance to his acting that he was able to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. He's a really good actor. Was he your first choice for the part?
As far as I know, yeah.
Yeah. Great choice.
Yeah, great choice.
Yeah. Were there ever any doubt if you wanted to put everything in the book? Did you ever think that maybe this is too much, or did you just...
The commemorative volume?
Yeah.
No, I wish I could have put more in.
Yeah.
At the last, as I was putting everything together, I had met with the composer, Jeff Beal,
Yeah.
who lives close to me here in Malibu, and great guy. I mean, we spent the afternoon together, and as the book was getting closer and closer to having all the elements, I suddenly thought it would be so interesting to put in some of the score.
Yeah.
Since he won an Emmy for it. So I called him and I said, "Can you give me some of the score?" And he was able to pull some of that from his files, and so we ran some of the score in the book. But if we'd been able to do more of that kind of thing, I would have been very happy.
Yeah.
There wasn't too much
Yeah, when you read the book, it really feels like you have put everything in it that you possibly could.
I think so. I mean, there may be something I forgot, but you know, I would have liked. I think that the volume that you saw doesn't have all the color photographs. Is that right?
Yeah, no color in this one.
The completed book will have color photographs, which are all very, very interesting. And,
Yeah.
you know, they're from the set and all kinds of stuff. You know, more photographs I would always have been in favor of.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the DVD will accompany. I think if you buy a certain edition of this, you also get a DVD. The DVD, and the DVD comes in this beautifully designed box. So it's pretty. It's a really great addition to the book.
Yeah, it sounds like the perfect book. You get the DVD and you get the book about the DVD, and
Yeah.
I mean it's a very complete package.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Have you got other reactions from people outside making the book who's read it in
Yeah,
reviews?
everybody who's read it loves it. And,
Yeah.
And I also we've now gotten about 5 reviews, and every single review has been a rave.
Yeah.
I mean, people are they're really. I think number one, they love Stephen King, of course.
Yeah.
They loved the story.
Yeah.
And they loved how it was filmed, and it was and they loved William Hurt. So you put it all together, and we would have had to really screw this one up.
Yeah.
For them not to like it.
Yeah. Have Stephen King seen the book?
You know, I don't know. I don't know if he's seen it yet. He's a busy guy, so I'm not sure.
Yeah. Speaking of Stephen King, have you been a fan of his for a long time?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with him, and I grew up with him not just as a young writer, making my way forward in prose, but and film, but also because he had this close relationship with my father.
Yeah.
And they both have, I think, deep respect for one another's talent, and Steve has said such remarkable things about my dad, and my dad has said remarkable things about Steve.
Yeah.
So, and then there was for a brief kind of wonderful time, I played drums in Steve's band.
Ah, okay.
Which was really fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's been part of my life for a very long time.
Yeah. Do you plan to adapt another story from his?
It would be an honor to do it. I was approached, it's been a while now, to do Insomnia.
Yeah.
As a mini-series, and then I forget all of what happened. Sometimes these deals come and they go,
Yeah.
They never made. Did they make Insomnia?
No.
Yeah. So we got very close on that one, and I was unfortunately not able to do it. I had previous commitments, so I was very disappointed
Yeah.
not be able to do that one. I suspect there will be other things that we'll do, where we travel in such a similar world.
Yeah. You should definitely do Insomnia.
It would be very interesting. It's a fascinating book.
Yeah. Do you prefer to write for television and maybe miniseries compared to a feature film?
They're really not that different, except that the film business has concentrated itself much more on big commercial success.
Yeah.
In order to survive financially, and television has really become more focused on the vision of the creator.
Yeah.
And in television, also as a writer producer, you play a tremendously significant role, because there's such a need for constant material.
Yeah.
That the writer becomes really the supreme voice in television and becomes the final word.
Yeah.
The writer-producer. In film, it's the director.
Yeah.
And so, as a writer, you really are in an atmosphere in television that really is that allows you to fulfill your creative vision.
Yeah.
In film, it's always kind of, it runs hot and cold.
Yeah.
But as far as miniseries, I love them. I'm doing H.G. Wells' The Time Machine.
Okay.
As a 4-hour miniseries, and enjoying it greatly. I had done at one time Dean Koontz's Soul Survivor.
Yeah.
I did as a miniseries. It's a very interesting form. You can really explore things in greater depth.
And I feel today you can do more in television, both visually what you can actually show on TV and
Absolutely.
and money.
The budgets are a little higher.
Yeah.
It's also, the word is out with actors.
Yeah.
That, it's the place to really have an opportunity to explore a character, because if you have a series that has any duration to it, the actor has sort of an unparalleled chance to explore the character.
Yeah.
In a film, you've basically got an hour and a half.
Yeah.
With the right film, that's plenty, and you can do something brilliant. But I think for an actor, the idea of having their own series, it's steady employment.
Yeah.
They get to live in one location, which is very appealing to them.
Yeah.
If they have families, and so you're and creatively, they can really begin to take a character and not just embellish it, but deepen it.
Yeah.
And so we're getting really, really wonderful actors coming to television that never would have looked at it before. It used to be, when I first started in television, there was a real kind of apartheid between film and television. If you were in the film business, you were seriously in the business.
Yeah.
If you were in television, it was considered sort of second class.
Yeah.
Compared to film. Now, I would say that began to narrow, and then it became invisible. That difference became invisible. Now, I would say every serious writer I know wants to be in television.
Yeah.
And they're making fewer movies now too. And
Yeah.
There are so few movies that are getting made, and everyone is wrestling for those few opportunities. So, on a business level, it gets to be a little ferocious.
So you're gonna have to talk to Steve and do Insomnia with him for TV. Yeah.
I don't know why it never did get made, did it?
No.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's really quite a fascinating book. It's really quite surreal.
Yeah, I think it might be hard to visualize it, but
I think so. I think maybe that could be a big challenge. And I remember some of it, and I just remember this is very surreal.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah, very, very fascinating. Okay, it's been very nice talking to you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Okay, so that was the interview that Hans did with Richard Matheson, who scripted the Nightmares and Dreamscapes episode Battleground. And in addition to that interview, you have something else to say.
Yes, I do. We have from Gauntlet Press one copy of the book that we are giving away to one of you listeners. And to be able to win it, you will have to answer a simple question and head over to liliaslibrary.com and answer it there. And you have to answer it before May 20. And then in the next podcast, we will announce the lucky winner.
And what is the question?
And yes, the question is, what other King project did Richard Matheson almost do?
Ooh,
yeah.
Interesting. Alrighty, so there you go, folks. So ends part one of our second podcast. We had so much material for this podcast that we couldn't fit it all into this one. So tune in next week when Bev Vincent will return to do a group review about Stephen King's latest book, Wind Through the Keyhole. And we're going to also talk about Bev's book, The Stephen King Illustrated Companion. And we'll have the mailbag. So until then, stay safe, but stay scared. And scene.